Studies suggest that approximately 25% to 45% of women experience urinary incontinence at some point in their lives. The prevalence of urinary incontinence tends to increase with age. It's estimated that around 50% of women over the age of 65 experience urinary incontinence. There are different types of urinary incontinence, including stress incontinence, urge incontinence, and mixed incontinence. The prevalence of each type can vary among women. Urinary incontinence can significantly impact a woman's quality of life, leading to embarrassment, social withdrawal, and limitations on daily activities. So it's important to note that urinary incontinence is often underreported due to embarrassment or the misconception that it's a normal part of aging. Therefore, the actual prevalence may be higher than reported. So in today's episode, we have a special guest, a return guest, the renowned Kegel Queen, Alyce Adams. So join us as we explore the often overlooked issue of urinary incontinence as we age. Alyce sheds light on this common yet misunderstood condition, offering insights into its causes and impacts on daily life, from discussing the stigma surrounding incontinence to practical tips on how to manage and even prevent it. This conversation is both informative and empowering. So tune in as we navigate this important aspect of health and wellness with Alyce Adams, the expert in pelvic floor health, and just say goodbye to that sneeze pee. All right, let's get going and come on in. Did you know that our struggle with weight doesn't start with the food on your plate or get fixed in the gym? 80% of our weight struggle is mental. That's right. The key to unlocking long-term weight release and management begins in your mind. Hi there, I'm Rita Black. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, weight loss expert, best-selling author, and the creator of the Shift Weight Mastery process. And not only have I helped thousands of people over the past 20 years achieve long-term weight mastery, I am also a former weight struggler, carb addict, and binge eater. And after 2 decades of failed diets and fad weight loss programs, I lost 40 pounds with the help of hypnosis. Not only did I release all that weight, I have kept it off for 25 years. Enter the Thin Thinking podcast, where you too will learn how to remove the mental roadblocks that keep you struggling. I'll give you the thin thinking tools, skills, and insights to help you develop the mindset you need, not only to achieve your ideal weight, but to stay there long term and live your best life. Hello, everybody, and come on in. You know, sometimes you just like someone so much you want to have them back and dive in deeper. Well, that, my friend, is what I have done today. I have brought back one of Thin Thinking's favorite guests, the Kegel Queen, Alyce Adams. Now, I suffered urinary incontinence after the birth of my son, so this is a subject very close to my heart and even closer to my bladder, and I want to just dive right in with you. So Alyce Adams, RN, is the Kegel Queen. Since founding KegelQueen.com in 2009, she's known as the most sought-after Kegel exercise expert around the world, helping women who suffer with vaginal prolapse or urinary incontinence to avoid dangerous surgery and regain health and control of their bodies down there. She is famous for creating the Kegel Success in Minutes a Day program, the only complete, no devices, safe-at-home Kegel exercise program created and tested by an RN. The Kegel Queen program has reached thousands of women in 30 countries. Alyce has shared her Kegel expertise as a guest blogger for the American College of Nurse Midwives and as a guest lecturer at Bastyr University in Seattle and the University of Rochester in New York. Most recently, she has consulted with the Stanford Biodesign Fellowship at Stanford University in California. Hello, Alyce. Welcome to the Thin Thinking podcast. Welcome back.
Thank you,
You
Rita.
are a second time visitor here.
Thank
It's
you.
good to
I'm
have
very
you.
pleased to be back.
We had such a great chat the last time you were on. I believe we definitely talked Kegels because you're the Kegel Queen, but I think we were talking about prolapse, which is one of your specialties, right?
Yep.
But today we are going to have the glamorous topic of urinary incontinence, which is, I'm sure a favorite amongst all of our listeners. If you haven't had a leaky bladder yet, you probably, well, I don't want to suggest you will, but Alice is going to tell us all about this. But Alice, you have a little bit of a fascinating story about how you got engaged in all of this, being the Kegel Queen and, Kegel royalty, I should say. Um, Tell us a little bit about you and how you got into where you're at today, helping people in the way you do.
Well, like so many people, and like you, Rita, my story began with my own problems, and I needed to solve them. So, what happened with me is I was not the same after I became a mom. It started in pregnancy, actually, for me, and I ended up with a leaky bladder. I ended up with symptoms I did not know were classic symptoms of a prolapsed bladder, which means the bladder is literally fallen out of its proper position. And I had problems with sex. And I kind of at first was like, well, I guess this is what it's like being a mom. But then I realized, it really doesn't have to be like this. I'm gonna get this fixed. And when I say get it fixed, I don't mean I want somebody else to fix it for me. I meant I'm gonna solve this problem in a healthy, independent way. And I knew Kegel exercises can help with those issues. I didn't know about the bladder prolapse symptoms, this like heaviness and sagging I had. But I knew Kegels could help with sneeze pee. I knew that Kegels are good for better sex. I had been doing Kegels on and off for years, totally wrong, with no benefit, of course, because if you do something wrong, you're not going to benefit from the way you would if you were doing it right. So,
And
um,
lots of people are doing it wrong, right? Like
oh my
it's a
gosh,
common,
It's I people probably do Kegels wrong more than I don't know, more than a lot of things. It's
like
just
9 times out of 10, they're
rampant.
doing it wrong.
No, more like 99 times out of 100. I've talked
Okay.
with thousands of women about Kegels and literally a tiny, tiny handful. I can still count on one hand the number of women who have said, I knew already everything you taught me. And some of them follow that up to say, well, I'm a professional health researcher or something. So, um, yeah, women are totally doing Kegels wrong. And I would love to talk about some of the ways they do that, especially Kegel devices. That's kind of to say it's a pet peeve would make it seem like it's not nearly, it's more like a mortal enemy because it makes me so angry that women are sucked into these traps of trying to do Kegels in a way that doesn't work. Um, so yeah, women are doing them wrong, right and left, and I was one of them. And I realized this isn't helping, and I tried to find out how to do them. I started looking around. Everything I found was garbage, essentially. So I went straight to the research and I spent a year reading studies from all over the world. And I put together the best of the best of those programs. I turned it into a simple minutes a day program that I could do, and everything changed for me. And my sneeze pee went away. These saggy feelings that are like the typical bladder prolapse symptoms that went away. And my sex life came back just
Yay.
fine. So, yay. So, I've been on this mission now to help other women have that same experience and turn those problems around. And that's been 15 years now. And
So
it's a
exciting.
very gratifying, very, very, and it just makes me feel, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? It's just very fulfilling to help women with these things.
Yeah, it's an honor, I would imagine,
It
to
is.
see women come back to life with that part of their body because you start to I would imagine, well, I have, issues with prolapse because I think you and I have talked about that, but it's like you feel out of control.
Hmm.
And you start to kind of get disconnected from that part of your body. You start to
Yes,
resent that part of your body because it starts to get in the way of things. So to feel reconnected with it and to feel like
mhm.
you have ownership over that, it's so huge.
It's really.
So, yeah, that is amazing. Now, do more people come to you for like who are experiencing, like what is the driver to you? Is it because they are experiencing leaky bladder and sneeze pee, or are they, the other things that you were saying? It's just they could feel their bladder coming out of their vagina, or their, sex life has kind of gone sideways.
Yeah. So
What's the
the
biggest driver?
biggest driver of women to me is prolapse.
Mhm.
And I think it's because largely, I don't think women realize the power they have to improve their sex life and to improve incontinence. Women think because it's so common, women
Mhm.
think, well, I had a baby, or well, I'm 55, or
Yeah,
however old I am, and I leak. So do all my friends. So, oh, well, I guess
yeah.
that's just part of getting older. But that's a huge mistake to make, not only because there's something you can do, but also because if you tolerate incontinence without for one thing, if incontinence is new or it's severe or it becomes worse, you really need to get checked out. You really
Mm.
need a doctor to talk to you about it and make sure that it's not a sign of something serious going on. Sometimes urinary incontinence comes about because of maybe it's a medication side effect and you want to change your meds. Maybe it's a sign of something like multiple sclerosis that you need
Wow.
to know about. Sometimes it's the first sign of something not right. And so, what you want to do is make sure that what you have is the garden variety urinary
Mhm.
incontinence.
And
And
that would come from what? Like, what are the major things that might cause urinary incontinence?
one of them, interestingly to you and your audience, is excess weight. Excess body
Really?
weight is a big one. It's a
Is
real
that because of excess fat that lines the organs, or?
It's it's a body mechanics thing that the we're audio only, so I'm gonna sit on my hands so that I can just use words here. But it has to do with there are a lot of different ways that the tissues can be stressed incorrectly, and a lot of it has to do with so the pelvic floor is the pelvic let's back up a little bit. We'll zoom out to a higher bird's eye view. So the pelvic floor is your hold your pee muscles. That's not all they do. That's part of what they do. But we're talking about urinary incontinence. So these are the muscles that decide when you pee and when you hold your pee.
Mm,
Those muscles are like a sling. They're like a half of a sphere. It's a bowl of muscle between your pubic bone and your tailbone, essentially. That's a very
mhm,
oversimplified description.
mhm,
But if you can picture that, like if you put your hand right now find the edge of your pubic bone by your vagina and follow all that squishy flesh all the way back to your tailbone, everything in there, just on the other side of your skin, is this bowl of muscle, the pelvic floor. That bowl of muscle does not like a whole lot of pressure against it from the inside of the body. And when you're carrying a lot of excess weight, you are putting mechanical stress on those muscles day in, day out against the pelvic floor from like the inside. So if you
Mm,
imagine the pelvic floor like it's a bowl, right? And if
hmm.
you imagine it sort of like a child's party balloon, if there's pressure from the inside of the body against the inside of that bowl, it pushes on the bowl, it stresses those muscles, and it causes the pelvic floor to not work as well. So extra weight is a really significant factor. And for some women, simply achieving a healthy weight is enough to stop incontinence.
Interesting. And
Let
so
that
it,
land for a minute. It can be
yeah.
considered a treatment for urinary incontinence for some women simply to achieve a healthy weight.
That's amazing. I'm letting that land,
Yeah,
Alice.
it's powerful. It's and
It
we
is powerful. Is
and
that
when
the
you
same
think
reason why, like, so when you're carrying a baby inside you, the baby is pressing against the pelvic floor, and is that why it can cause incontinence? Is that the
that
reason?
is part of it, yes. Now, additionally, well, in my case, with pregnancy, there was a lot of vomiting,
Oh, and
really
that,
a lot in the
oh,
beginning.
you're
And
poor, one of those poor women who had hormonal
I
issues
had
and had to throw up
hyperemesis.
the entire time.
Yeah, it was only the first trimester, but I had to have an IV. I threw up so much. It was really, really
Oh
bad.
my goodness.
And that's what started my problem. So like by the end of the vomiting stage, I would just had a stack of towels, and if I had to vomit, I was in bed because I was so sick that I was just in bed, but I'd had my towels by me, and I would get ready to vomit, shove a towel between my legs, and just vomit and pee. It was horrible. It was so bad.
Thank goodness.
So yeah, vomiting. Then there's simply the body mechanics of that weight, especially if you're like almost every woman in our culture and your body mechanics are not optimal because we sit all the time in
Yeah.
chairs, our glutes are weak. We have all kinds of body mechanics that contribute to problems with the way our everyday weight is carried. Then when you add the weight of pregnancy or the weight of being overweight, that just exacerbates the situation. And then of course there's giving birth, which can stress the pelvic floor as well. It doesn't necessarily become a problem. And I want to be clear that some women think about cesarean as a way to prevent pelvic floor issues or avoid those problems, but cesarean of course comes with its own risks to the mother and baby,
Mm.
and um, you have to do 10 cesareans to prevent one case of urinary incontinence, so the math doesn't really work out on
Oh,
that.
wow.
um,
That's
but
amazing.
women really should uh, do pelvic floor exercise, aka Kegels, after giving birth to help the pelvic floor come back to its
Hmm.
pre-pregnant state. Um, so those are some causes. Another thing is the tissues in our culture too. I'm always very curious about what things would be like if we all did everything optimally for our health from childhood. And one of the things that's changed in human history, compared to like every culture all over the world for forever, that's different from now is we don't eat a whole lot of collagen. There's
Oh,
That's coming back, especially as a
yes.
supplement. The
Hmm.
whole bone broth thing, that's part of the conversation now. But my great grandmother probably had soup made from bones all the time, as has
Right.
pretty much every human all over the world from the dawn of time. But I, and probably you, Rita, grew up, we had soup like that sometimes. We
But it
had it
mostly came
after
out of can.
Thanksgiving. Right. But yeah, most of the soup came up from Campbell's can
Campbell's.
and did not have collagen. And you can only build collagen till you're about 30 years old. and then you're just preserving it. And so when we haven't had the option
Uh-huh.
to really optimize our collagen, then by the time we get to be 50, 60 years old, our collagen is not as strong as it could be. And all kinds of things happen then with our tissue integrity all over the body, actually.
Oh, really?
We get wrinkles.
Yeah.
That's what that is, for example. But if you have wrinkles on your face, it means that the collagen elsewhere in your body, from your blood vessels to your pelvic floor, the collagen is not what it could be. So everything after menopause also becomes less elastic,
Hmm.
and the pelvic floor really can suffer from not having as much blood flow, especially if you don't exercise. Um, Urinary incontinence also is they're pelvic floor factors, but they're also bladder factors. So women are a special risk for pelvic for bladder related urinary incontinence if they have been teachers or in the military or nurses or otherwise have not been able to just pee when they need to. Someone who's spent years not able to pee when she needs to can end up at risk for incontinence.
Fascinating. Wow. Is that because they've had to hold it in and that's done weird things to their bladder?
I'm not sure of the exactly how that works, but it's a neurological thing.
So
Isn't
it
that?
is partially your pelvic floor incontinence. And that could be only your pelvic floor. Like it could be
Yeah.
that, it
Yes.
could be just your bladder, or it could be a combination of both.
Well, so incontinence is really never just the bladder, because if your
Okay.
pelvic floor is working really well, it should be able to fight back
Okay.
enough to stop actual incontinence, even if the bladder sort of goes rogue and gets its own ideas about peeing at an inappropriate time.
Right. Is there like, because you see so many women and or deal with so many women in your courses and you know, I know you used to do this as a practice. Is how wide is the range of incontinence? Like you talk about sneeze pee, like maybe that seems like a minor, or I mean, it's not minor to anybody who's sneeze peeing, but more than like somebody who just can't even hold it in for any length of time. Like there's like very wide range of
Oh, yeah.
incontinence.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And yes, you're right. For many women, it's, you know, just sneeze pee. So you might have a spot on your underwear if you sneeze. And then, yeah, it's the full continuum to women who dribble constantly, or women who, maybe if they sneeze, they lose everything in the bladder, not just a little spot. Um, and women who suffer with urge incontinence. I don't like the term overactive bladder because the pharmaceutical industry invented that term
Oh, interesting.
to sell drugs. I prefer to use terms like urinary urgency
Hmm.
and urge incontinence, which are related but different. But some women get really, really bad urge incontinence, and it's worst for most women who have that. Um, Many women get what's called key in the lock syndrome. So when you get home, here's a tip for bladder training, which is something we can talk about, bladder training.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but an easy bladder training prevention tip is when you, and I do this, when I come home from somewhere, even if I have to pee, unless I'm just desperate, which doesn't happen that often, but I don't go straight to the bathroom. If I come home with my groceries or whatever, I intentionally put away groceries or I go and do some little task before I pee. Because if you get home and pee every time the minute you walk in the door, you will train your bladder that the minute you get home, it's time to pee. And many women have this key in the lock syndrome where they pull in the driveway or they go to their front door and they lose bladder control because the bladder is just like a pet dog. It's learned what to expect. And it's like, oh, home
Ah,
now, time to go.
interesting. So I know that's one example. I'm sure there's many examples. So it's kind of like Pavlov's dogs. It once it's trained, then it will have an expectation.
Yes, and appropriate to, your interests and your audience. The bladder, there's a lot of nervous tissue in the bladder, and the bladder brain connection is a
Mm,
huge part of continence when you have bladder issues, when the bladder is contracting at the wrong times, whether you have the pelvic floor strength to hold it in it or not, and it becomes incontinence. Either way, when the bladder is contracting at the wrong times, there's a lot you can do with your mind to train your bladder and behaviorally to train your bladder out of it. So,
mm,
like not peeing the minute you get home, or a lot of women in my program talk to their bladder. Like
mm,
if you feel like you have to pee anytime you walk in the bathroom, the bladder's like, all right, time to go, even if you don't actually have to go and it's
right.
not time. Um, you can talk to your bladder. I have women say, some women say it has to be out loud. Some say it works just in your head, and women say different things. Like people say, hold, thank you. um,
Oh, I
but
love that.
yeah, but you really have to, if the bladder is misbehaving, it really does need to be trained like a misbehaving dog.
Oh, you
You
give it
have to
little bladder treats for,
yeah,
yeah, sit,
you
stay.
have to you have to teach it that your brain is the alpha.
Very interesting. It's so intricate, the bladder. It really is. Because I think of my own like trickle syndrome. I had bladder surgery when I was 5 to correct this what is the muscle around the top of the urethra when it was overactive. So I had to go pee literally every hour. Like
Oh
it,
no.
I felt like I needed to, even though I
Oh
didn't. And I
gosh.
had to have corrective surgery.
Oh wow.
But yeah, so it's so intricate and all you don't think about like, oh yeah, brain bladder connection, bladder talk. I love that little dialogue with your bladder.
Yep.
That is very cool. So if somebody like I know you help people with this, what other than like I want to hear all about what you do, but like if I know you said this, so they're Kegel devices and
Yeah.
like what's out there that's wrong? Like what's out there for incontinence that we should be avoiding,
Mm.
if we other than are you a fan of the diapers in the diaper store? I mean, like in the adult
Well,
diapers, I mean, they're necessary, aren't they?
yes,
For
they absolutely are. So let's talk about diapers, and then let's talk about Kegel devices. So I obviously I'd rather women don't need briefs or pads, but they're very important. And uh, just in case anybody, I don't want to leave any minutes hanging here without people hearing devices bad. We'll talk about that in a minute. Um, but what I think it's really, really important for women who need pads or briefs
Mhm,
to use them.
mhm,
I Nothing breaks my heart more than women who stay home, who don't travel, who don't exercise, when they could throw on a brief and go out. I know nobody wants to wear one. I know nobody wants to get caught wearing one. I know nobody wants to travel with putting that stuff in the trash somewhere. But if your choice is to get out and live your life imperfectly that way versus just stay home,
mhm.
you gotta just do it. Life is for living. And until you can get better control, live your life. It's key.
Yeah.
Um,
I think they've done a really good job with marketing and bringing it out of the
Mm-hmm.
darkness and the shame into the light, with the ads and such. I mean, I think they've done a really good job. And it looks like there are really great products on the market that,
They are. They're
they don't
better
look
now.
bad. They don't look like Pampers. They're like, they look like a pair of underwear, right?
Yeah. And they're not noisy, you know.
Right.
They don't have
Crinkle.
a big profile under your pants.
Yeah.
They're good. I
Yeah.
used to get really heavy periods, and I've actually used them. Sometimes I would say,
Matthew.
I'm all done with periods now, but I have
But
actually worn adult briefs for my period, and they're comfortable,
yeah,
very easy. It's really,
that's smart, actually. That I never thought of that as an idea, but that is a good idea. So yeah, now let's talk about other like if I was going to my doctor, what is he going to tell me to do? Is he going to tell me to pop a pill? Is he going to tell me
oh,
to
yeah.
out in the real world?
Yes, let's talk about that. We have to talk about devices though, because we said
Okay.
we would.
Yeah, I know.
So
Passionate about that.
yes.
So let's
So
do that.
Kegel devices are there are two categories essentially. They are unnecessary devices and harmful devices.
Okay.
So um, and they're all inconvenient. I have a blog on my website called Six Reasons Not to Buy a Kegel Exercise Device. I have another blog all about a particular one with a brand name that I just think is an enormous waste of money and time. Um,
And
so
what
I
is
don't
your
know how,
website right now? So if somebody wanted to go, ooh, I want to go check that
yes,
out. What is your website?
yes, kegelqueen.com.
Okay. That's
Kegelqueen.com.
easy.
You'll have a link, I'm sure, for me, Rita. Um,
Yes, we will put a link in our show notes for sure, but just in case, how people now are like, I'm going to go look that up now.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so,
yeah.
so there's a couple so tell us a little more about these devices. Like, I can't picture what a Kegel device would look like. Like what?
Well, there's a range, and it's almost like sort of comical, almost how many different kinds, different approaches there are. The ones that I get asked about the most, though, are the electrical stimulation devices.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, there are other ones too, like there are ones that connect to your phone and you can squeeze them and you get a little thing on your phone. Um, uh, it's just completely unnecessary and expensive and inconvenient. You've got this thing you have to put in your vagina, you have to wash it, you have to store it, you have to plug it in. I don't, um, but the ones that I hear about the most that women have a lot of questions about are the electrical stimulation ones, where it's like, we do Kegels for you. So you
Mm.
attach this thing to you, whether it's like a pair of shorts like Innovo, or there's like a kind of like a sticker thing, like
Mhm.
Ellatone is another one. And these deliver an electrical impulse to the pelvic floor muscles and cause them to contract. And so talk about the brain connection to other body parts. You're completely ignoring it
Yeah.
when you are doing that, right? Your brain is checked out, you're causing contractions, but you're not learning how to contract and release the pelvic floor. You're not connecting with that part of the body, as you were talking about, that the pain of disconnection
Mhm.
from your pelvic anatomy. If you're trying to reconnect with that part of the body and bring it back home, you want to be engaged with your muscles.
Yeah.
It's as silly as putting electrodes on your arm to build your biceps instead of just get a weight and do some curls.
Right. Right.
It's just silly. And then there are other devices, and then again, I have a whole blog post about that. If you would like to hear more about all the ways those electrical devices are really not so great. Um, Another category of devices, that the ones that are actually harmful, is
Mm.
any kind of vaginal weights. So
Oh,
sometimes doctors prescribe these. There are many you can buy independently on the internet. The idea is you put a weight inside your vagina and hold it in while you're
mm,
vertical.
hmm.
And this is very harmful because, again, you're not connecting with your brain. But what's harmful is that you're training the muscles to just tighten. What's healthy is to train your pelvic floor to contract and release. We don't want a tight, clenched pelvic floor. That is
Right,
no more fun than having tight, clenched shoulders or a tight, clenched jaw. We want the
right.
pelvic floor to be strong but supple and relaxed when it's relaxed. And, a tight muscle not only feels bad and can be very painful, but it doesn't work as well. So if your pelvic floor is too tight, that can contribute to incontinence as well. So vaginal weights, really, really bad idea. A
Wow.
really bad idea.
Wonder how that all got started. And do they have different levels of weight for them? Like there's,
Yes. Yeah, they come
like
in
in a gym?
sets. They come in a set,
Oh, wow.
but
So,
it's really not constructive.
so how, like, if there was a, if you were going to like approach incontinence with somebody, or if how would you approach this if you're not, obviously it's through exercises, right? But
Yeah.
what's your
So,
philosophy like?
yeah. So, Kegel exercises and lifestyle.
Mhm.
So, lifestyle is going to include getting to a healthy weight, as you can help people to achieve. It's going to include exercising correctly so that you're not unintentionally doing damage by putting the wrong kind of pressure against the pelvic floor from the inside of the body.
Mhm. Do a
It's
lot of people do that, like exercising
Oh, yeah.
correctly?
Yes, and the worst offender is all manner of crunches and sit-ups, whether
Oh,
they're in
wow.
Pilates class or just like straight, you know, the sit-ups we were doing in 1970, whatever.
Oh, those, yes.
Yeah, really, really unhealthy for your pelvic floor. And I just heard today, I mean, they're not good for any part of your body, but I just heard today that they doing those classic sit-ups actually creates micro tears in the discs of your spine.
Oh, yes. I've heard that because I've had a osteoporosis diagnosis,
Oh
and
dear.
so I become very aware of like, oh, you cannot sit up in these particular ways or do
Uh,
sit-ups and stuff.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting. But yeah, it
Yeah.
is. It's like so those sit-ups are, those old sit-ups are bad news.
Yeah. Terrible. There's
So
diet. There's diet. So you want
ex-
to watch out for many foods that might be perfectly healthy and nutritious and wonderful, but could still contribute to incontinence or cause incontinence, like green tea, cabbage family foods like broccoli, citrus fruit, tomatoes. Sometimes those things, different women are sensitive or not,
Mhm,
but something like lemon juice is high acid, can
mhm.
really aggravate incontinence, even though it's not junk food, it's not unhealthy.
And this is
Then
because it's impacting the quality of your urine, or
it's
the
yeah,
pH
they're
balance of your urine.
often, yes, they're increasing the sensitivity of the bladder or irritating the bladder.
Hmm.
And they're also junk does that too, like sugar will do
Hmm.
that as well, alcohol. And then
Hmm.
other things like carbonated drinks can do it.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot, and there's personal, it can be different for everybody. So women should test themselves, but changing your diet to avoid the things that are really and there are then idiosyncratic things too. Like for somebody, it might be soy. For another person, it might be whatever they happen to be sensitive to, fish or gluten or whatever it is. So really testing and knowing how different foods affect your body is key. But sugar's a big one, and I know you can help women with that too.
Yeah. And then the exercise part, like, so taking the time, like if somebody was working on their incontinence, how much time per day do they need to be, focusing on that? Is that a big
Yeah.
time
Minutes.
frame?
Yeah.
Minutes?
Minutes.
That's
Minutes a
amazing.
day. So, and of course, the exercise for the rest of your body, you want to spend more than a few minutes on that. You want to do your walking and moving and all of that good stuff. But to do Kegels correctly is minutes a day. It's not a
Really?
big commitment. Now, I will say many pelvic floor physical therapists will prescribe a whole program which includes additional body parts,
Right.
and that can take a long time. That can be 20 or 30 or 40 minutes a day. Um, and it may be that what I really like for women to do though is start with Kegels. Keep it simple. Start with Kegels. Once you get that under your belt, haha. Once you get that going, then you can add the whole body alignment work that might really help you sort of address the root of the problem more. But to begin with the whole 30 or 40 minutes a day, like no one is going to maintain that.
Yeah, it seems like just starting. I mean, can people see relief from incontinence just by doing a couple of minutes a day and making
Yes.
these other
And
lifestyle changes?
well, and in as little as a week, actually, some women with incontinence, because of that brain connection,
Hmm.
if all you learn it is just simply how to contract the pelvic floor effectively and release effectively. If you have that skill, you can, many women do. Of course, it's different for everybody, but the research shows this, and my experience bears it out, that many women will see improvement with incontinence in as little as a week.
Wow, this is extraordinary.
And it's
That's
just
amazing.
because you're using your brain. You're just learning how to
Mm.
re-engage with that part of the body that we can become so disconnected from.
Oh, yes. Well, this has been so fascinating. Now, if somebody was going to, like, if somebody was, totally like, oh, I've got sneeze pee or, oh, I can't, take it anymore, what would be the first step that you would have them take?
Um,
In addition to going to your website, of
yeah, I
course,
was
and
going to
learning
say
all about
come to
it.
kegelqueen.com because I have it all mapped out for you when you get there. Um, I think the first step is, particularly with incontinence, is recognizing that it's not normal. Just because it's common doesn't mean that it's normal. And
Mm, makes sense.
acknowledging that this is something that, number one, you have the power to change, and that you don't need to feel helpless about it. You don't need to figure it out all alone. You don't need to ignore it. You don't need to put up with it. This is
Mhm.
something that you can take on and heal. And it doesn't have to be a thorn in your side. It is something, and not everyone's going to be 100% cured. you
Mhm.
know the not there's nothing that is 100% cured by anything in the body,
Mhm.
we
Yeah,
but women can take control, women can improve, and women can, most importantly, make a shift from feeling powerless to feeling in control and knowing that they're doing everything they can.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, it's so you're right. You kind of hit the nail on the head is that I think as we age, especially, we kind of start to take a lot of these little like downgrades in our physiology and our mental thinking for it's just part of the aging process.
Yeah.
And it may be, but it doesn't mean that we can't turn it around or improve
Yes,
it and make it better. So
absolutely.
that's very cool. And or yes, after having a baby for sure. Yeah, it's those little things. We're just like, oh, well, that's just the way it is for us gals.
Yeah.
You're saying it's not. Doesn't have to
No,
be. You can be the
it's
queen
not.
of your Kegels
That's
and
right.
and
And Yeah, I agree completely about all of that age-related stuff, that it's just part of getting older. Whatever it is, it's not.
Mm.
The getting older is many things, and we need to do it gracefully, and we need to accept that we're going to be going through changes. But if you have a health problem,
Mm,
just because you're older doesn't mean that it's normal to have a health problem.
yeah. And what you're saying is they should definitely, if it's a problem, they should at least get it checked out to make sure it's nothing that
Yes.
might be the root of something more serious.
Yes, yeah, you don't want it to be the first sign of something like, I don't know, of MS or like Parkinson's disease or a nerve problem and
Right.
not know about it. You want to know about it.
Oh, well, this has been so helpful. So now, yes, Alice, tell us about your fabulous website because it sounds like it's the Garden of Eden for all information for below the belt. So what will we find on there?
So, there's cool stuff there if you're interested in learning all about why you should not buy a Kegel device or why you shouldn't use a name brand electrical stimulation shorts that I won't mention unless maybe I already did, but
Well, we didn't say it. We don't know. We're innocent.
uh, so there's all kinds of cool stuff on the blog. And if you do suffer with prolapse, there's all kinds of information about prolapse as well. That's very dear to my heart to help women with prolapse. There's a whole thing about pessaries. Um, I've got a blog post about how not to be a victim of your doctor or feel like one. Um, there's,
Cool.
yeah, and there's
That's a good.
always free, cool women's health info, particularly for women over 50, on my email list. So if you come and see me, get on my email, and there's always some really cool stuff going on in there.
Yeah, and sometimes you have free master classes and things too,
I
right?
do. I do. I do.
That's so cool. So definitely kegelqueen.com. I will put the link in the show notes. Uh, Alice, this has been so great. Thank you for coming back. We'll have to have you come back again and talk more about things below the belt and our wonderful female parts. But it's lovely to see you, and thank you for coming back on the Thin Thinking podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Rita. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Alice. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Now, make sure to visit Alice's website, kegelqueen.com, for all the amazing resources that she mentioned. And the link is also in the show notes. Listen, have an amazing week. And remember that the key, and probably the only key to unlocking the door of the weight struggle, is inside you. So keep listening and find it. I will be here, hopefully, with you next week. You want to dive deeper into the mindset of long-term weight release? Head on over to www.shiftweightmastery.com. That's www.shiftweightmastery.com, where you'll find numerous tools and resources to help you unlock your mind for permanent weight release, tips, strategies, and more. And be sure to check the show notes to learn more about my book, From Fat to Thin Thinking, Unlock Your Mind for Permanent Weight Loss.